before jumping into our next challenge, I wanted to introduce you to our guest judges. Letty T, Executive Wine Editor of Food and Wine magazine. Then Doug Frost, one of 3 people in the world to hold both a Master of Wine and a Master of Sommelier degree. In this next challenge, we're going to test your knowledge of the relationship between food and wine.
I thought it was going to be interesting just because somebody who's in the wine business should know how to do wine and food pairings. So I thought it would be a good way to see what everybody knew.
So you all know, food and wine can be incredible bedfellows. They can create synergy where both the food and the wine exceed the individual parts. But food could really interfere with the enjoyment of wine too.
So for the challenge, we're going to have you compete in 3 teams of 2. Each team will be assigned a 3-course tasting menu prepared by Chef Evan Treadwell of the Dolphin Bay Hotel, with which you'll pair 3 wines. The total you can spend is $175, and you have exactly 30 minutes to buy the wine.
When the judges outlined the food and wine pairing challenge, I got pretty excited because that's the type of thing that got me into this business.
Now Ross, Taylor, you 2 were our top performers in the last challenge. So you get to choose your teammate first. It just can't be one another.
I'd like to work with Alan.
I'm going to take the sommelier.
Well, that leaves Dan and Lauren. You're the 3rd team.
I didn't have a problem with how I was teamed with Dan. It was only fair that the winners of the last challenge got an opportunity to pick who they wanted to work with, and he's definitely a strong player.
We've invited 4 additional judges to help us with this challenge. Now combined, they have hundreds, if not thousands, of food and wine pairings under their belts. So you guys need to get this right. After this next challenge, we're going to have to eliminate 2 of you. Good luck.
Some ginger and habanero.
Yeah, some odd combinations of things. The first thing when we got back to Dolphin Bay was we just sort of talked about basic wine and food pairing ideas that we had. At that point, you don't really know what you're pairing with, so you can't talk a lot about it.
If he's looking at giving us simple foods.
If I had a choice, I wouldn't be choosing Taylor because he's easily frayed, especially when it comes to things that happen around him. He can certainly get in that kind of freak out mode, and that's not good for winemaking.
Let the food come out, or else it's going to clash too much.
I'm sure that a lot of the teams are going to be looking at this food and wine thing, and they're going to have popped open old cookbooks and looked up traditional matches. And that's great.
I've got a few axioms that I kind of, operate when it comes to food and wine pairings. Match your weights. Absolutely. When in doubt, do what the locals might do.
There are certain tendencies in the mouth and in the nose for one aroma to cover up another aroma, or one aroma to complement another aroma, or one flavor to impact another flavor. For instance, bitterness, astringency, characteristics that usually come from the skins of the grapes. Tannin is usually the term we use for those. Those tannins can be softened by salt. Salt will literally fill up your bitterness receptors. It's why we use salt on eggplant. Eggplant is very bitter. You put a bunch of salt on there, bitterness is gone. So the same thing can happen when you're combining a wine with a food.
I'm guessing that the way they'll approach the challenge of food and wine pairing is to try to do something very ambitious. It will be interesting if someone comes up with something really, really simple, something really, really basic, but I don't think that's going to happen.
How you doing today? Chef
Dan.
Evan?
Evan, good to meet you. I'm Dan.
Dan?
I'm Lauren.
Hi, Lauren. How are you?
Nice to meet you.
Let me run down the dishes for you today.
Okay.
This is kind of a French-inspired menu. So our first dish here is a wild mushroom and escargot or snail cassoulet.
Wow.
We have some garlic, some bone marrow butter. We actually got the bone marrow and blanched it to get some of the blood out of it, and then we mixed it in with the butter to give some richness to this dish. And then we topped it off with a little bit of hazelnut and some more garlic, and then we mixed in some celery root, and some butternut.
The menu was great. It was an interesting twist on French food. The escargot reminded me of a cassoulet, and I just kept mentioning that there was so much more going on besides the escargot, which is typically just garlic, butter, and a snail.
And next we have a braised lamb. It's lamb shoulder. It's cooked slowly for a couple hours. So then we sauteed up some green French lentils with some spices. And then we have a classic potato gratin.
Some of the spices that the chef chose to use, are always a little challenging, and you're trying to pair the wines with everything on the plate, because when people eat, they don't just sort of eat one portion of the plate and then have the wine. They have a tendency to eat a little bit of everything. So when you're doing a pairing, you really have to try to think of the plate as a whole. So that was definitely a challenge.
And this is a chocolate and fig creme brulee. A little bit of pistachio cream. Some more chocolate on top, and then a homemade fig Newton.
Awesome. Homemade fig Newton.
Using the pistachio cream, sort of threw a curveball instead of it just being a very straightforward creme brulee. I definitely think the chef threw a little bit of a curveball in there.
This is a fresh halibut that's been marinated in a black bean sauce with a little bit of soy, a little bit of sesame, and then it's steamed.
It was actually a very light fish. Had a little bit of spice, had some pretty interesting flavor. There's a little grilled asparagus to throw a curveball into that one.
So now we have another Asian-inspired dish. It's a sesame-crusted ribeye. Wow. That's been coated in a soy mustard glaze and then rolled in some sesame and seared. And that's a little bok choy.
Well, it was actually very creative, and it was very modern. It's basically a little fusion menu. It's got a little Asian touches, some classic touches.
I'll tell you the first thing that jumps to my mind when I'm thinking of wine pairing for this. 2005 Côte d'Aron's have had such a good run lately.
One of the things that was most challenging about the menu is we had two of the most difficult things to pair wine with, asparagus and bok choy.
And then our final dish, we did a little play on sushi. If you look at the menu, you'll see it's dessert sushi with some mango, some coconut, and some mint.
The thing that was challenging most to me about the menu was that it was all Asian influenced. We weren't about to start serving sake. So it was a challenge to accommodate the Asian spices and the Asian influence in each dish with a wine that was from the other side of the world.
Are you ready to see your menu?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
All right. Do you see any food here?
I don't.
No, chef.
That's
No food. What do you see?
I see a phone book. I don't know if we're going to be eating that tonight.
That's
Is
right.
that gonna
You
be-
know why there's a phone book here? Because today you're going to do takeout.
A lot of people would think, and in fact said, that this was an easier challenge to do because we got to choose our own menu, when in fact I believe that was a harder challenge because we had to deal with the stress of creating a menu, basically what America eats and takeout, and figure a way of working that into a 3-course menu and pair wine up with that.
We were given $175 to spend on the wine, and we really wanted to pick out the wines that we thought would work the best and then figure out how that was going to work into our budget.
What do you think?
Well, let's see what they have for white Bordeaux, because I know that was something that we were looking at too.
The first rationale was to stay with French wine, as opposed to picking from domestic and maybe something from Italy and something from Spain.
$175 for 3 wines. That immediately sounded like more money than we needed to me. One of the things you learn quickly in the wine world is that the most expensive wine is not always the best wine. So what we tried to do was decide on categories and maybe grapes that we were interested in, and then find the best example of that to fit the slot with the food.
Let's get takeout. It's takeout time. I think we drew the short straw, basically. The other teams were able to go into a kitchen and have a tasting, 1, 2, 3. James and I had to go all over St. Louis Obispo and at the same time figure out what restaurant I have to go to. And then figure out what entree or what food group I'm gonna get from that, and then go to another one again after that.
Dry Gewürztraminer.
I believe Taylor chose me because he believes that, you know, I have credibility and I absolutely know what I'm doing when it comes to food pairing.
Once we got our menu down, we said, this is so crazy for us to have to do this menu at the same time. We need to go with a classic set of pairings. Perfect. This is exactly what we wanted. So we said, you know what? I know they want interesting, but we already have interesting in the fact that we're doing Thai shrimp salad, that we're doing pizza along with, you know, ribs. Let's do classic pairings. Let's get everybody to understand that you don't have to just grab a beer when you're getting your Thai food.